Okay, thank you for joining today's session. So today we start in a new unit, which is data preparation and quality. So in today's session, our learning outcome, we'll now have to undertake basic data extraction and manipulation using SQL queries. So this unit will now help our learner to develop an understanding of basic data extraction, manipulation, combination of common quality issues. So again, I want to remind that this level of qualification might be suitable for people that are beginners with not much knowledge with SQL. And then there are some other students who might already have a good understanding of this subject. So Johnny, I believe that as a data analyst, you already work with these technologies on the day-to-day.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, we use SQL in bits and pieces here and there, and a lot of Excel and stuff. So yeah, data preparation and data cleansing and all of that. Yeah, very familiar with it.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like even this unit should be shouldn't be an issue for you. So we will cover every learning outcome regardless. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so our learning outcome in the context of database management and data analysis, we know that SQL is very important and a powerful tool, which again allows us to communicate with our database, where we can perform extraction, manipulation, and cleansing. So in this unit, we're very much going to cover the fundamentals of SQL, and we'll now cover basic commands that will allow us to filter in results, aggregating data, and manipulating database queries. So data extraction, which we have covered in our previous unit, we can now see from the definition that with data extraction, the SQL is now going to involve retrieving specific data from databases. So the primary command used for this purpose is our select statement. So with the select statement, allows us to select different column, and we can now use also from, which allows us to retrieve from a specific table. Filtering data with where. So where is mainly used to filter records based on specific conditions. So we've now initiated SQL. We've selected our column, and we can retrieve our table. And with where, we can now retrieve the first and last of our employees who work in the sales department. So we can see that where allows us to find from maybe another from a department, which would be sales. Sorting allows us to order by sort, which could be set in ascending or descending order. So we can now order by last name. For example, when we're now retrieving our employee fields. Limit result with limit, where we limit clause, we can now restrict the number of rows returned by a query. So this query will now retrieve the first 10 entries of our employee's first and last name, because we've now set a limit of 10 values. Again, we've explained data extraction. With data manipulation, we're now going to involve inserting, updating, and deleting data within our database. So the primary commands used for this operation are going to be insert, update, and delete. For example, here, insert into statement will now allow us to add new records to our table. For instance, we can insert a table with column 1, column 2, and column 3. And we can look into the values, which could be names such as John, Matthew, marketing. Updating. With update, we can now modify existing records in our table. And delete allows us to remove existing records from our table. Aggregation function in SQL allows users to perform calculation of multiple rows of a table column and return a single value. So common aggregation function will now include count, sum, average, maximum, and minimum. So we can now counting records. So with this example, the query will now count the number of employees in the sales department. Summing values. With this example, the query is now going to calculate the total salaries of our employees in the sales department. Average. With this query, the average salary of our employee in the sales department will now be calculated. So understanding and performing basic data extraction and manipulation, we'll now be using SQL, and it is very essential for a day-to-day data analyst which could be working with a database. So we now have to have the ability to retrieve, filter, sort, and aggregate data, which allows for efficient data analysis and reporting. So our learning outcome 1, we're now going to carry out a simple data extraction using select, where, and from clauses. As you can see, the documentation will now provide an overview of simple data extraction. And these are now fundamental components in SQL that allow users to query within databases. So our simple extraction will now use our basic syntax, where we're now going to use the select statement, which will now be used to specify the columns that should be retrieved from the database. And then with the comma-separated column, we can now specify multiple columns by separating them using a comma. With distinct keywords, we're now going to ensure that the result contains only unique values. Renaming, where with columns can be renamed using AS keys to make result more readable. With the where condition, this condition can now use text literal, where we're now going to enclose in single quotes or numeric literals. Comparison operators. This allows us to make to compare different values. With the between range operator is now used to filter results within a range. In the list operator allows us to filter based on list of values. Boolean operators allows us to include and, or, and not. So using bracket, we're now able to control the order of evaluations. From allows us to join multiple tables. So with this, we can now specify the condition to join different tables. So there are different types of joins. We have inner join, which allows us to retrieve records with matching values in both tables. Left join allows us to retrieve all records from the left table and match records from the right table. And right join allows us to retrieve records from the right table and match join from the left table. Outer join, this retrieves all records when they're in a match in either left or right table. Cross join, this also known as Cartesian join, produces the Cartesian product of two tables. So joining multiple tables, joining more than two tables in a simple query. So here we have this summary of our type of values, and we also have a syntax example for them. So to conclude, select where and from clauses form the foundation of data extraction in SQL. Learning outcome 2.0, we're now going to manipulate the product of analysis using order by and group by clauses. So when it comes to manipulation, order by and group by are now going to be essential tools now in SQL. So this will now allow us to sort queries, results, and aggregate data for more meaningful insights. With order by clauses, we can now sort the result set of a query by one or more columns. Comma-separated columns. So we can now sort by multiple columns, separating them with commas. So with this query, we can now sort employees first by the last name in a ascending order, and then by their salaries in a descending order for those with the same last name. So we have ascending versus descending. With ascending, this is a default sort order, while descending is used to sort the result in reverse order. With SQL aggregate function, this will now perform calculation on a set of values and return a single value. Common aggregate function will now include minimum, maximum, sum, average, and count. With the group by will now allow us to group rows that have the same value in a specific column into a summary row. So this is the simple syntax that we will now have to use when we group in, for instance, by column or rows. Aggregation function, we can now use minimum, where we now return the smallest value, or maximum, where we're now going to return the largest value. Sum will now return the total sum, and average will now return the average value. Count will now return the number of rows. Here we have a much example query where we're now going to use order by with group by. So this query is now going to group employees by department, count the numbers of employees in each department, and then sort department by employees count in a descendant order. Here we have an example of using having with the aggregation function. So basically this query will now group employees by department, calculate the total salary for each department, filter the result to include only department where the total salary is now going to exceed 1,000, 1 million, and sort the result by the total value in the descending order. So here we have a summary table of what we've covered so far. So we now know that order by and group by clauses are very powerful tools when it comes to organizing and summarizing data. So now in this learning outcome 3, we'll now use 6 of functions and operators in data analysis. So we know we've looked into some of the operators. We mentioned them earlier. Now we'll see how they've now be used. So these tools can vary in syntax and functionality depending on the type of relational database management system provided to us. So we have general functions where we now use NVL to replace no with a specific value. With this value, we're now going to return different value depending on whether a specified expression is null. Decode is now going to provide if then else functionality. With this, we're now going to return the first non-null expression among its argument. no if returns no if the two expressions are equal. Also, we have arithmetic operators, which are used to perform mathematical operations, where we could add, subtract, multiply, and divide. And also we have modulo, which gives us a percentage. Type of conversions. With this function, we're now going to change data type from one to another. Day converts a string to a date, and to number, we now convert a string to a number. So these functions are now going to perform operations on string data type, such as lower and upper. With lower, we're now going to convert a string to lowercase, and with upper, we're now going to convert the string to uppercase. With this, we're now going to convert the first letter of each word to uppercase, and concat, we now calculate two strings. Length, we now return the length of our string, and with subtract, we're now going to extract the substring from the string. Data function is going to manipulate and format data values with now, which return the current date and time, and current date return the current date. Current time return our current time, and date is going to extract the date part of the date time. Extract will allow us to extract part of the day, and day add will now add a specific time interval to our date. We can do the same for date sub, which is going to subtract a specific time interval from date, and date DIF returns the difference between two dates. And we have date format. With format, the date according to a specific format. And then we have numeric function, which perform mathematical operation. This will now return the square root, and with pi, we're now going to return the value. Square will now return the square of a number, and round is now going to round the number to a specific number of a decimal place. Shading, this will now round the number up to the nearest integer, and floor will now ground the number down to the nearest integer. Insert will return the position of a substring within a string, and LPAD will now pad the left side of a string. RPAD will now pad the right side of a string, and trim will now remove leading and trailing space from a string. Also, we can replace, which will now occurs of a substring with a string. We have conditional function with if function. This will now return one value if a condition is true and another if it is false. case statement. This will now evaluate a list of conditions and return one of multiple possible result expressions. Advanced functions such as current users, databases, and version. Then we have comparison function for no, where we have is no, check if a value is no, is not no, which will now check if the value is not no. Here is a summary table of what we've covered so far. So we now know that function and operators in SQL allows us to enable complex data manipulation and analysis. With our merit activity, we're now going to annotate the code with appropriate comment. So annotating SQL code and using set operators, which allows SQL to comment and use them to explain the code and make it more readable. So commenting is a very important feature when it comes to programming, because it allows your code to be clear and understandable when it is being used by other developers. So comment in SQL are now done by using a double hyphen and single line comment. So additionally, when setting operators using union or union or except and insert, these are now used to combine results from multiple queries. So we can now see that comment in SQL are used to provide explanation or any sort of note about the code. And here we have an example of where we've added some comment by using the double hyphen. Set operators. These are used to combine the result of two or more select statements. Union is going to combine the result of two queries and remove duplicate rows. Union or will now combine the result of two queries and include all duplicates. Except will now return the result of our first query that are not presented in a second query. In intersect will now return only the result that are present in both queries. So here we now look into example with annotation, where below is an annotated example combining multiple SQL functionalities, including comment, set operators, and select statement. Here's an example of them. So here we have a summary table of how these set operators are going to be used. So as we can see, comment in SQL are a very important tool when it comes to making our query understandable and maintainable. Our second merit activity, we're now going to explain the role and importance of comment in our code. So again, why did we say it is important to comment it? it is very important because we might not be the only person working on this project. So in order for us to make it understandable for the other developers, we have to have the ability to add comments to it. So the importance, again, is to keep clarity and readability due to the fact that we might not be the only people working on this project. Maintenance and debugging. By having a clear understanding of the code, people can now maintain and easily debug our SQL code. Again, here we have a summary table where we have all the aspects: syntax, readability, performance, use case, and so on. So we now know that commenting SQL code is the best practice, that we're now going to enhance readability, maintainability, and overall quality of our code. So this was everything for today's session. Is there any question for me?
Thanks, Victor. No, that's all very clear. Yeah, very familiar. Yeah, no, that was good. Thank you.
Okay. So if this was everything, we can now join the second session with the other link. But we'll have 5 minutes break.
Okay, cool. See you in 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Cheers, Victor. Bye.